Picture this, it's the 11th and 12th centuries, and two incredibly powerful invaders from Central Asia are looking toward India. And they don't just see a neighboring land, they see immense, legendary wealth. Their actions are about to do more than just empty treasuries. They're going to permanently change the path of history for the entire subcontinent.
But here's the real question, the puzzle at the heart of it all. You have two Turkic invaders, right? They come from pretty similar backgrounds. Yet what they wanted and what they left behind couldn't be more different. So how did that happen? Let's dive in and unpack this.
So, our story really kicks off with these two rival powers, both based in what's now modern-day Afghanistan. On one side, you've got the Ghaznavid Empire, a major force, already well established in the region. And on the other, rising up from the rugged mountains of Ghor, you have this new, super ambitious dynasty. Both of them would turn their attention to India, but, and this is key, for completely different reasons.
So you might be wondering, why India? Why then? Well, to understand the opportunity, you've got to look at the political landscape at the time. And it turns out both Central Asia and India were in a state of massive change, which basically created the perfect storm for an invasion.
Over in Persia and Afghanistan, the once unstoppable Abbasid Caliphate, this was the huge Islamic empire that had dominated the region for centuries. Well, it was crumbling. This created a massive power vacuum, and that allowed all these ambitious, independent Turkic warlords to step in and carve out their own kingdoms. This is exactly the world that created a man like Mahmud of Ghazni.
Meanwhile, believe it or not, North India was going through something remarkably similar. There was no single unified empire holding everything together. Instead, you had all these powerful kingdoms locked in this constant struggle for power, all fighting for control over the same strategic city, Kannauj. This infighting left them really exposed.
We're talking about major players like the Gurjara Pratiharas, the Palas, and a bit later, the Chauhans. Now, each of these kingdoms was powerful in its own right, for sure, but they were also bitter rivals. And this deep-seated political disunity, this inability to come together, created a critical weakness that an outside force could and would exploit.
Okay, so let's zoom in on our first main character, Mahmud of Ghazni. His name, even today, is tied to one thing above all else: raiding India.
And get this, between the years 1000 and 1026, he launched 17 campaigns into North India. 17. Just let that sink in. That's like a new invasion almost every year and a half.
And this right here is the absolute key to understanding him. Mahmud was not an empire builder in India. He was a plunderer. His goal was simple: use the legendary riches of India's temples and cities to fund his own ambitions back in Central Asia, and then go home. And if you want the perfect example of this strategy in action, look no further than his most infamous campaign, the raid on the Somnath Temple. It was never about conquering the land. It was about zeroing in on a center of incredible wealth, breaking its defenses, and hauling away its treasures.
Okay, let's fast forward a little over a century. The power of the Ghaznavids starts to fade, and a new dynasty, the Ghurids, rises up out of those mountains in Afghanistan. Their leader, Muhammad of Ghori, looked at India and saw something completely different. He didn't see a treasury, he saw a territory.
This is the fundamental difference, the whole story in a nutshell. Where Ghazni saw a piggy bank to be raided, Ghori saw land to be conquered. Where Ghazni raided and went back home, Ghori planned to conquer, stay, and rule. And that one simple shift in ambition was about to change Indian history forever.
But, you know, if you want to build an empire, you've got to take out the most powerful person standing in your way. And in North India at that time, that person was Prithviraj Chauhan. This set the stage for one of the most decisive showdowns in Indian history.
So in 1191, they meet at the First Battle of Tarain, and Prithviraj forces absolutely crush Ghori's army. Ghori himself is wounded and has to retreat in total humiliation. But he was relentless. He spends the next year rebuilding his army, learning from his mistakes. And in 1192, he comes back, this time with 120,000 highly disciplined cavalry. The result? A complete reversal. Prithviraj's forces were totally overwhelmed, and that single battle changed the fate of North India forever.
So you've got to be asking, what happened? How did Ghori pull off such a dramatic turnaround? The answer is so much bigger than just one battle. It's really about these deep-seated differences in military tactics, in politics, and even in the very structure of their societies.
All right, so let's really break it down. What were the key factors that led to this Turkish victory?
First up, and this is a big one, there is a clear military edge. The Turkish armies were built around this core of super-mobile, mounted archers. I mean, they could move fast, attack the enemy from a distance, and then charge when the moment was just right. Their command structure was also way more centralized, and they used clever tactics, like holding back fresh reserves to send in and break an enemy line that was already exhausted. Second, it comes back to that chronic problem we talked about earlier, the disunity of the Rajput kingdoms. They were always fighting amongst themselves, which meant they could never form a truly solid united front against an invader like Ghori. On top of that, their armies were basically feudal, meaning soldiers were more loyal to their individual chiefs than to one single commander, which makes coordinated strategy almost impossible. And third, there's a factor that often gets overlooked, and that's social structure. In India at the time, the rigid caste system meant that the job of fighting really only fell to one specific class, the Kshatriyas. The Turkish armies, on the other hand, were way more egalitarian. They drew soldiers from any background as long as they had skill. This not only created a more cohesive army, but it also gave them a much bigger pool of potential warriors to pull from.
So after all of this, what was the ultimate result of Ghori's victory? Well, it wasn't just the end of a battle. It was literally the beginning of a brand new era for the entire Indian subcontinent.
And this right here, this is the single act that defined his entire legacy. After the battle, Ghori didn't just pack up all the loot and go home like Muhammad of Ghazni did every single time. Instead, he appointed one of his most trusted generals, a man named Qutbuddin Aybak, as his governor to actually run the lands he'd just conquered. That one decision was the seed that grew into something massive. After Ghori's death, his governors in India established the Delhi Sultanate, the first great Turco-Afghan empire based in India itself. And this new political power would go on to rule over huge parts of the subcontinent for the next 300 years.
So all this leaves us with a final big question to think about. Was the Turkish conquest just the result of one pivotal battle going a different way? Or was it something more inevitable, the result of a fractured India colliding with a newly unified and expansionist Central Asia? It's a fascinating question and one worth pondering.